it's worth it. Like it's worth going in on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's worth like having that on your mind all the time, like that obsession that comes with it, because you're building something for you and for your family and for your posterity.
Welcome to the Lead In Podcast, where we dive deep into genuine stories of leaders who've seized control of their journey. This podcast is brought to you by Lead Hub, your growth partner for the trades. And now, let me kick it over to our guy, Austin Lenny.
Guys, welcome. We got Mr. Matt Ballard in the house. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Doing good. So Matt and I were commiserating about ownership, before we got on, which is where it goes to. But I loved your episode on Owned and Operated, and we talked with the team and we got to know you, and we will talk HVAC. But I'm more intrigued on who you were before all this. I wanna see what built, as I call you, the operator's operator, right? So kind of tell people how you got your career started, I guess, or kind of even at college if you want to. It doesn't really matter to me. However far you want to go.
Well, so my dad is an air conditioning contractor.
Okay.
And so from a young age, I was involved in the trade and in the industry in some capacity. I had a former business partner that when he would introduce me, used to joke that as I came out of the womb with like a set of gauges, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but from the time I was really young, different levels of exposure. I picked weeds in front of the shop as a younger kid, saw some things, spent time in a sheet metal shop, learning how to make dust pans in my free time and different things like that. I pushed a broom. But my first, like what I look at is my first real job in the trade. I was, I think, 17 years old. And my dad had a service manager who was kind of getting up there in age, and he was a field service manager, and so he was out running service calls himself in addition to helping support all the other technicians. And so my job was to make sure that he lasted one more summer in Las Vegas as a service manager. And so my job was to lift everything. And the guy was quite a bit bigger than me, and I'm not a big guy right now. I was even smaller at that age, and so we would get to a house, and if it was a rooftop unit, I knew that I didn't even need to go talk to a customer. My job was to get that ladder up first of all. And so I'd go pull the ladder off the van, throw it up on the roof, secure it. Then I'd grab his tool bag and take his tool bag up onto the roof for him already. He'd need parts. I'd go get the parts and bring them up and down, the refrigerant, everything. And the great thing about that was I got tremendous amount of exposure with somebody who was extremely technically competent, one of the best technical minds in the industry. And so it kind of developed from there. And I did that long enough that I learned that I hated air conditioning. Mm-hmm. It was brutal work, and I didn't know how my dad had done it for so long. And so I'd made a decision. At age 19, I left to go serve a mission in South America for my church. And so I spent 2 years down in Brazil, knocking doors and meeting people and serving and teaching and all that type of thing. And towards the end of that time down there, I get an email from my dad saying, "Hey, while you were gone, we joined this contractor success organization. It was an organization called Airtime 500 that's still in existence today. And they talk about having a salesperson to go sell air conditioning. And we want to have you come back and do that." And in my mind, I'm like, no, I don't want to work in air conditioning. This sucks. Like, I hate climbing in attics. I hate going on rooftops. I want to go to college. And so I got home and we had some conversations on it. And so I figured we'd give it a shot. Straight commission sales while I was going to college wasn't that bad of a situation to be in. So I'd go to school in the morning and I would take sales calls in the afternoons and evenings. And I'll never forget my very first sales call I go on. It almost felt like it was a setup, like my dad had already sold a job. And it was like, hey, I got to get my kids some confidence here. So we're going to send him out. Just say yes to anything that he does. And so I go out there not really knowing what I'm doing, no serious training or anything. And I sold this rooftop unit change out. This was back in like 2004. I sold it for like $9,500. And I remember coming back just like scared out of my mind, thinking that I didn't charge enough money and like I didn't get enough measurements, and like it was going to be some big mistake. And so I bring it and I show it to my dad and his partner, and they started laughing. And I'm like, oh great, this is the end of it for me.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind I thought I'd made so much money, and these guys are laughing because I screwed up so bad. In the reality, they're like, you overcharged this customer so much money. I was like, well, I was so scared that if I didn't charge enough, that like you guys are going to fire me or whatever it was. So we ended up doing the job and then refunding a couple $1,000 back to the customer, saying like, yeah, we overestimated. We didn't have to do as much work as we planned. And so we issued the customer a refund. And that was my very first sales call. And from there, I got into some more formal training, and eventually worked in residential sales for a number of years. When that was happening, I was going to school full time in the mornings. Chased a girl up to Utah. She was a girlfriend of mine. We were dating in Las Vegas. She transferred to University of Utah, so I figured I would go up to Utah as well. I transferred up to BYU and went to school there for a little bit. And when I was going to school at BYU, I realized that when you live in a college town, everybody likes to pay college wages. And so I went and found an air conditioning company to work for. So I found a 1 hour air conditioning franchise that was kind of in that market. And so I did the same thing there. I'd go to school in the mornings, and then I'd run sales calls in the afternoons and evenings, and eventually got to the point where I realized that this was kind of like a calling for me. I was not going to pursue my education any further. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in the trade, particularly in sales and management and business operations, that type of thing. So the company I was with at the time offered or gave me the opportunity to move back to Las Vegas and take a position at their location down there. And so I called my dad and I said, hey, I'm dropping out of college.
Wait, let me get this straight. You dropped out of college and moved back to town, but with a competitor HVAC
Well,
company?
that was the idea. So I figured before I made that move, I owed him the conversation. So I called him, said I'm dropping out of college, which he wasn't happy about, number one. And he's like, well, you can't do that. And I was like, well, like two things. Number one, you did. And number two, you're not paying for my school. So I guess you can't tell me no. And I said, and I'm going to go work for a competitor. And he's like, well, we really don't want that to happen. He said, let me talk with my business partner and we'll see if maybe we can bring you back. And so they talked a little bit later that afternoon. I got the phone call that said, yeah, you can come back. We'll put you in as the sales manager. We want you to oversee all of the residential sales for the company. Great. And so I moved back to Las Vegas after I dropped out of college. And I did that. And I did it for a number of years, eventually ran operations for the family business for a number of years as well. But I don't know if it's a positive or a negative, but I've got this, I guess, drive that I always am trying to get more. Sometimes it's fantastic to have that, and other times it's a major deficiency of just like never being happy enough, or never being it's not sufficient enough. And so I approached my dad and said, I've been at this for a long time. When are you going to retire? Like, I want to take over. I want to run this thing. I want to grow it. I've got these aspirations that I want to achieve. And he and I weren't on the same page with what should be done with the company. He was perfectly happy keeping it at the scale that it was, and I wanted more. And ultimately, it came down to it's his company, it's not mine. I didn't earn it. I didn't put in the time like he did, and so I had to make a decision. It's like, am I willing to hang around until he's ready to retire, to where I can do something for myself, or do I need to step aside? And so I decided that it was time to move on from the family business. So I joined a wholesale distribution company. The company's called Geary Pacific Supply, 30 locations all over the Western United States. They brought me in to develop the indoor air quality segment for their business. And so the first year, that's all I did was work indoor air quality and growing the sales, the product offering, all the different programs, built out training for contractors, all the internal training, everything. And did that. After a while, they gave me another division of the company to oversee, built out a team. We started growing that business like crazy, a lot of success. COVID hits. And I had a serious mindset shift. I'd been traveling for work nonstop, and all of a sudden I'm grounded. I'm at home. I'm with my wife. I have 3 daughters. I'm listening to them doing their Zoom education, and I realized that like I was gone too much. I needed to be home. And so I decided that I was going to quit the wholesale industry and that I was going to start a consulting company and focused on training technicians, which in my mind is like, well, if I'm able to control my schedule, I should be able to be home a lot more. And so that was kind of the idea. And then you get doing it and you realize like, no, that's not how training consulting works. Like you're only earning money if you're in front of customers, bringing value to them. And I ended up traveling just as much, if not more, than when I was in wholesale. And so it's like, even though I was making good money, I was having success, I was being fulfilled from a career standpoint. It was not doing it it was not happening with my home life. And in the process of doing this, who has become a really good friend of mine, a guy named Tom Howard. He owns some companies in California, super successful contractor. He's also an executive at Service Titan. And he and I were talking one day, and he just made the comment. He's like, when are you going to give up this consulting crap? Like, you're going to get burnt out, and it's not a great business. It's like, yeah, you can make good money when you're doing things, but if you want to build real wealth, you're never going to do it through, consulting in this space. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine for now. But eventually I hit the wall. I call up Tom one day and I go, I can't keep doing this. And I wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't looking for anything. It was more like I needed to vent to the guy that was right. And so I started venting to him. And sure enough, like I think it was about a week and a half later, I get a phone call from Tom. And he goes, hey, I got some guys that I think you should talk to. They need to bring in a partner that knows the industry pretty well and knows the operation side. They're buying some businesses. Think of it like a small private equity fund type company. And I said, well, I'm not quite sure about that. It sounds not quite what I'm looking for. And he goes, well, you're on speakerphone with them right now. Like, say hi. And
I like Tom. So Tom sounds like me. I always shove people in conversations. He's like, my buddy's like, I was in Nashville last week. He's like, I want to meet this guy. You know him. He's an old client. I was like, oh, you mean like right now? And he goes, dude, how did you do that? I'm like, let's just have a conversation.
That's Tom. And I mean, super high sense of urgency, no point in waiting. It's like, you want to talk right now. He goes, yeah, I'm driving him to the airport. They came to look at my operation here. So like, say hi to him. So I start talking to him, and I had a couple phone calls with these guys, and I honestly felt that they were just going to be another consulting customer.
Yeah.
And I kind of had like this little surreal moment. A few weeks later, I'd taken my family. We're on vacation in Hawaii, and I'm sitting on the beach, and I get a text message from one of the guys, and he goes, hey, I just sent you an email. I'd like you to take a look at it. And so I pull up the email, and it was an offer. Not for consulting, but to come in as a partner in the company and to oversee the operations of all the acquisitions that they'd made. And I'm sitting there just like kind of floored a little bit, and I'm like, wow, do I really want to do this? Or, and so I'm talking with my wife, and who's always been just wildly supportive of me. Any crazy idea, she's just like, yeah, do it. Which sometimes is absolutely amazing. but at the exact same time, like, there's definitely things that like I've gone after that she's encouraged me on that she should have like been the voice of reason and been like, hey, slow down, or
Yeah.
have you thought this one through completely? But so she's like, yeah, you should do it. I go, you sure? And she goes, yeah, I think you'd be really good at it, and I think you'd probably have a lot of fun. I go, yeah, but I'm these companies are all over the country. I'm going to be traveling, and that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to avoid. And so I get with them, and I tell them, I said, my only concern that I have here is the amount of travel. And they said, you will be 100% responsible for your travel. We will not tell you where you have to go or when you have to be there. That is going to be your decision. I was like, great, I can do that. But again, just kind of like my natural drive is like when I've got a project, I want to work that project and I want to get it done and I want to move on. So I work in this space for a while, end up getting into the acquisition side of the business a little bit. And again, we're growing the company, things are going well, but it becomes painfully aware to me that, the main reason why I left wholesale to begin with was so that I could be home with family. I didn't accomplish that in wholesale. I didn't accomplish it in consulting, and I wasn't accomplishing that working in private equity either. And so I went to my company, said, we need to buy a business in Las Vegas that I can operate because I'm done traveling. Like, I'll step aside from my position if that's what you want me to do. I'll just be an operator of one of the companies that you guys own. So we started pursuing acquisitions in Las Vegas in my backyard, and we came across a business called Sunrise Mechanical. It was a company that I'd known for a very, very long time, major player in the market. Most of the revenue is residential new construction. So working with national home builders, these publicly traded companies. And so we went down it, that road and pursued it, got it under contract. And in the process of getting the business under contract, we go to put the funding in place. And most of the lenders that would give favorable terms on the deal would look at it and say, okay, it is a new construction company. There's a certain amount of risk that's associated with that. But they also didn't like the debt structure of the company that I was a part of. And said they feel like you guys are too over leveraged. And it's a big deal. I mean, the Sunrise Mechanical is doing over 5,600 lots per year. It's a significant amount of projects. It was a big acquisition that we'd negotiated. And so eventually what ended up happening is that my company had to back out of the deal. And in the process of doing that, our banker that we were working with had one of the potential financial partners reach out and say, hey, if the two guys that were working the deal, myself and then a guy named David Brown that worked for me in acquisition, if Matt and David would be willing to leave the company, we would sponsor them in the deal. They liked it enough, they wanted it, and so they reached out to my company. They pushed it through the proper channels there to make sure that there was going to be no conflict. That they'd allow us to walk away. Eventually, we struck a deal that allowed David and I to leave the company to pursue the Sunrise acquisition, with our former employer being a minority shareholder. And so that was the deal that we worked up. So I quit my job in roughly end of October of 2023. The sellers of the company, because of all the delays and everything, basically told us, like, you guys have 60 days to close this deal. If you can't close it in 60 days, we're going to put it on the market. We'll hire a broker and we'll go down that pathway. It was an off-market deal when we found it. And so David and I, we quit. We put everything into it. I mean, just the number of individual transactions in the deal was pretty crazy. There was a real estate component that was outside of the business. And so like that was one transaction. We were doing a sell lease back on it too. So we were going to buy that real estate, immediately sell it to an investment company and lease it back. So that was a different transaction. We actually had the transaction with the sellers, that agreement that was in place. And there were two companies, there were Sunrise Mechanical and Sunrise Service, two separate legal entities. Then on top of that, we had the deal with our former employer to put that contract in place, that agreement in place. And then we had an agreement with our lender that we had to put in place as well. And so we're doing all of these different transactions simultaneously in a very short period of time over the holiday season. Eventually, we got to the point where we closed on the deal December 29th. It was the last day of the year that we actually could close on the deal and have the sellers be okay with it. Super difficult transaction, so many different moving parts, but we got it done. And we did it with a pretty small team. It was David, myself, our banker advisor, a guy named Mel Gilbert from GVC Financial. He's kind of a little wizard. We had an amazing attorney.
Yeah, I was about to say, who's this attorney? Because he needs a steak dinner. Yeah.
Well, so he's out of this world. I mean, one guy
did the four.
One guy did all of these transactions and did them at just a level that was unbelievable. His name's Chris Wilson. He actually lives in Salt Lake, but his firm is based out of Southern California. But he's,
I mean, this man should be
incredible.
Hoisted up on top of a chair and cigars for everybody.
He was
lawyers make or break the deals.
Oh, and this guy made it. I mean, he himself was dealing with a team of attorneys on the lending side, which I think there was like 3 or 4 attorneys from the lenders that he's dealing with. He's dealing with the attorneys from the sell side, and they had, I think, 3 attorneys that they were doing or that they had working it, and we had Chris, and he was just absolutely amazing on top of everything. Great counsel, just I mean. One of the guys that I probably respect most that I've ever worked with, just incredible.
So that's a crazy story. I love that I got to hear the whole thing finally. But I had one question the whole time. How was the first Christmas after you left the family business?
I left after Christmas. So it was I left between or let's see, I started in wholesale, I think it was like January 15th. So
does your dad still have his business?
He does. So
so what did he think of you buying this business? I'm very interested to hear that.
I'd been out of the market enough. You know, I'd been gone from the Vegas market specifically for almost 8 years. Okay. And so it wasn't like, you know, I left and I was like right back in competing against them. And so I called him up one day and told him, I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm in the process of buying Sunrise." And he's like, "Why would you do that?" It was like the first comment, because it's a new construction business. Yeah, he's a service company operator. Yeah. And I said, "Well, I think that's just a great deal. It's a tremendous opportunity. So we're going to do it." And he's like, "Well, man, good luck." There was never any animosity. He made a comment one time about, "So you're telling me we're going to be competitors?" And because of my ego, I made a comment of like, "Well, we're not really going to be competitors because I'm like 5 times your size now." And I'm sure he didn't appreciate that, but we have good laughs. I mean, we talk pretty openly. Yeah, he knows what I'm working on. I kind of know what he's struggling with. We still bounce ideas off each other. When we have issues on, you know, with vendors or, you know, equipment or realistically anything, we'll get on the phone and we talk. So in reality, I think my relationship with my dad was that first year was somewhat strained, but I look back now and it was absolutely the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And my relationship with my dad now is so much better than it's ever been in the past. And I think it's because we are not working together that it's significantly better. You know, not every family dinner now is about, you know, this technician did this or this installer did this or this marketing campaign isn't working. And, you know, now we talk about things that are really important. You know, the other thing too is, you know, how hard it is to go on a family vacation when
everybody works in the same company.
When everybody works in the same company. So it's like my dad and my mom and myself, we all work there. So it's like, okay, so if we're going to go to Disneyland, like who's going to stay home? You know, it's just like, it was really hard to do those type of things. Or like we've got a cabin just right outside of Las Vegas. And so, you know, it's we'd go up in the summer on holidays, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day. And it was funny because we'd get up there and it's like, all right, who's on call? Who's watching the calls coming in?
Yeah.
Did dad bring the hotspot up so we had internet? And it was, a lot of it was just focused around that type of thing. And now it's not. We just get to be family, and it's a much better relationship dynamic. But yeah, that first year was not great. One of the terrible things that happened. So I left in January of 2017, and my dad's partner passed away in March of 2017. He was having some health problems right at the time that I was getting ready to exit. And we didn't think that they were going to be too serious. He was having some heart problems and, problems with doctors and hospitals and getting the procedures done. So he goes into a care facility. And eventually they finally get him set up to have his heart surgery that he needs. And he passed away in the ambulance on the way to have the procedure done. And that was just such a massive blow to the family. I mean, this was my dad's business partner. He'd been with they'd been together for almost 30 years, and he was family. And so not only did I walk away, his only kid that was involved in the business, but a couple months later, his partner passes away. My wholesale company at the time that I was a part of, I went back to him and said, hey, I hope you're okay with this. If you're not, just tell me straight up. But I feel like I need to be able to offer my help to my family's business at this time. And their response was amazing. I mean, they said, take as much time as you need to do anything with the family business. We're here. Let's just stay in regular communication. And so there was times where I could, kind of flex back and forth. And so I could help with the family business if they needed me for anything, while still working the wholesale position, and was able to balance that. And so that was a rough time, really a rough time, because, you're dealing with the loss of somebody who had become family at the same time that we're in this really difficult and uncomfortable position of, hey, my dad and I are not on the same page. When, obviously he's my dad. I love him to death, and don't want to do anything that's ever going to kind of disappoint him or put strain on the relationship. But it was the thing that I had to do for me and for my own family. And he respected that. And as a result of all of these different things that happened at the time period, yeah, it was somewhat strained. Plenty of jokes with, I've got a younger brother that works in wholesale as well. He's fantastic. He's way better at it than I was. But we'd always joke that I'm definitely not the favorite son anymore. No, there's 5 kids. I dropped below all of them for a period of time. It was the running joke among siblings.
There's the ground level, and then there's
yeah, and then the joke was that, like, even my wife was a few steps above me in the pecking order, and my kids, and and we're brothers. That's how we joke. Somewhat dark humor, but yeah, we worked through that, and it was like you said, it ended up being definitely the right move to make for just the relationship between my dad and I.
So I look at the pattern in your career, and I look at where you are now in the last 9 months, 10 months, and having ownership of something. I feel like for driven people, especially people as driven as you, I feel like you were never going to be satisfied, no matter what you did, how much money you make, if there wasn't some sort of ownership. Because I think a lot of people, I have a friend right now who manages $5 billion, but it's not his $5 billion. It's the company he works for, and he's learning a lot, but he's fine with it, but it's coming, and I told him, and for me too, like, even when I ran other people's company, because I was a consultant too, even when I ran other people's company, it never felt, the burnout is more real. Burnout when you own is like acceptable. I'm not saying it's right, but it's acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that when you talk about, our brief conversation before we jumped on here, of just like
Mm-hmm.
the fun parts that, nobody is aware of, that they don't see, it's worth it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
worth going in on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's worth like having that on your mind all the time, like that obsession that comes with it, because you're building something for you and for your
Mm-hmm.
family and for your
Mm-hmm.
posterity. And it's a completely different dynamic than when you're doing it for somebody else, because it's really easy to, be in a, wholesale. I had Golden Handcuffs. It was an amazing job, an amazing company, got paid very well. I enjoyed what I was doing, but ultimately I knew there was nowhere to go from where I was. I wasn't going to own that company. It was a family business. I had the wrong last name. I'd already gotten married, so there wasn't even like a single
Mm-hmm.
daughter, and I was a
Mm-hmm.
single guy. Like that wasn't even an option. And you just come to the realization that, like, hey, I can keep building something great for somebody else, but and there's plenty of people that will be satisfied with that, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody has that tolerance to take that big of a gamble. But I knew for what I wanted to accomplish, and I knew for me that the drive that I have internally, that I wasn't going to be happy with that. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what really pushed consulting. That's what pushed becoming a partner in a private equity company. That's what pushed this, was ultimately you realize that, like, you can build for somebody else, and you can make good money, and you can have a great lifestyle. But for me, that just, it wasn't enough. I wanted more,
Mm-hmm.
and I was going to do anything that it took to get there. But outside of just that career focused drive, I missed so much of my kids' lives growing up,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and had to eventually come to the conclusion that there was no amount of money, there was no title, there was no success that I was going to have in my career that would uh, be worth potentially wrecking a marriage or destroying a relationship with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, like when we made the choice to buy Sunrise, it was like, yeah, there's a financial upside, but the thing that was seriously appealing to me is that I could drive home every single night. I could have dinner with my kids and my wife. I could sleep in the same bed next to my wife. I could wake up in the morning and take my dogs outside to go run around and go to the bathroom, and go have fun and get them fed and help get my kids ready for school. And it's honestly, it's like my favorite part of the day. It's like we're having success all day long at work. Yeah, we have the downside, we have the grind and everything, but I absolutely love being able to go home every single night and just sit down and spend time with them. This may sound weird, but like I enjoy helping my kids with their math homework.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, um,
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I love being able to grab one of my daughters on a Saturday and say, "Hey, we're going to go down to the office for a little bit."
Mm-hmm.
So I've taken my kids down. They'll come spend time with me in the office. They'll meet people here, so they know some of our staff and our team members here already. And it's kind of cool that they get to come in. They get to see something that, in reality, is theirs too. Yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
name's attached to it, but it's not just for me. It's for them, and they get to feel a part of something bigger as well. It's like, yeah, we have our family and we have great extended family, but they know that they have that here as well with these people that they've met. And it's amazing because some of the people that work here that have met my kids, they want to know about them. And they look at them as like they're not just this separate part of who
Mm-hmm.
Matt is. Like, no, we're all connected in here together, and
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones that we're doing this for. So it's kind of a interesting dynamic that we have here, but um, ultimately what it comes down to is all of what I'm doing day in and day out I don't feel like it's for me anymore. I feel like I've
Mm-hmm.
achieved a lot of success in my career. Um, it's really for them, and it's for the people here at Sunrise, is being able to allow them the ability to grow in their careers and achieve everything that they want to achieve. And we get to do that, which is like, that's pretty cool.
And if you were to remove, because we're not even going to talk like detailed HVAC, because you could just listen to Owned and Operated. He answered all the questions there, guys. Remove urgency out of a value or a skill. What would you say is your number one personal skill that's made you successful to put you in this position?
It's communication. And there's no question in my mind about that, is that I saw from a very young age, being around a bunch of trades people, is that I met people that were excellent technical minds, some of the greatest like service techs, installers. There was a sheet metal guy that used to work for my dad. His name was Lars. His hands were just destroyed. He'd cut himself so many times on sheet metal that like you'd look at him and you're like, it's just got to be painful to be Lars. But I met all of these people that were, in my mind, were just amazing and so good at what they did, and yet still struggled financially. And I come to that realization, it didn't matter how good technically I was. It didn't matter if I could fix any air conditioning problem or diagnose any problem that was out there, if I couldn't communicate and connect with my customer. And so I figured that I was going to put all of my effort into the communication side. And so I took plenty of communication courses. I'd go seminars, self-learning, audiobooks constantly. I used to drive around back in the early days when I was working straight commission sales, and it was Jim Rohn on CDs in the truck all day long. It was Tom Hopkins. It was Brian Tracy, Les Brown. And I just ate up every bit of that communication as much as or communication education as I could, because ultimately I knew that if I could connect with somebody and I could speak in a way that was powerful and that I could connect with them on a different level than most people connect in this type of environment, that I'd be a lot more successful. And so, but one of the biggest things that you take away when you learn communication is to shut up and listen. And so I think, I think it's important to throw that in there, is you can't just be a smooth talker. You can't just say the right things, but you have to legitimately listen with empathy, hear exactly what they're saying and why they're saying it, and just be really good at making that connection between, I've got somebody with a legitimate problem that they need solved. Like, what can I do to solve this problem as fast and as efficiently as possible for them, and make them feel good that at the end of the day, I'm not going to have to worry about coming across them in the grocery store because I did something, unethical or nefarious or manipulative. Like, I wanted to have the type of relationship that I could see them 5 years later and they're going to recognize me, and they're going to remember that I was there in their home selling them an air conditioner. And it's, kind of funny. Back in, I think it was about the year or two before I left the family business, there was a customer that I came across, and I'll never forget her. Her name's Valerie Christiansen. She's a good friend of mine now, but it was kind of interesting because I go to her home. It's a rooftop air conditioner. I even remember it was reverse airflow. And I climb up on the roof and I come back down, and I'm meeting with her and kind of presenting these different options and everything. And she says, well, I don't think we should go high efficiency. We're going to sell the home. We've already started building another home. And so this is really just so that we can, it was like a 35-year-old air conditioner at the time. This is just so that we can sell the house. And it's like, great, we can do that. So we find the solution for her. We install it. I don't think anything of it for forever. And then back in, let's see, I think it was 2019. Yeah, around 2019, is before COVID. I go to church one day and I see Valerie Christiansen at church. Never seen her there before. I moved to a different part of town, and she comes up to me and she's like, I remember you. And I go, at the time I remember she was a customer. I couldn't remember much about it. And she goes, you came to my house you sold me this air conditioner because we were going to sell it. And she goes, the thing that she remembered is that I didn't try to oversell her or upsell her or put something in that was not going to be beneficial for her, knowing that they were trying to get rid of the house. And she goes, and that meant a lot to me and my husband, Bob. And, we've never forgotten about that. It was like, made me feel pretty good that like, I never had to be worried about coming across a customer that I dealt with, because I think when you focus on doing the right thing for them, and that is that primary focus of when you take care of the customer, the employee is going to win, the business is going to win when you do things the right way. And so it's just so important to have that be a focus of, really being good on, like you said, on the communication side, on the listening side, doing honest and ethical discovery, and building relationships with people that can last for years and years and years. Because ultimately, my opinion, for what it's worth, is like that's where you excel in building something that's of significant value, is when you take that approach to it.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with George Bernard Shaw?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I've said the quote I've done 1,000 podcasts. I've said the quote 999 times. So the single greatest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. It's my favorite quote of all time because it's the truth.
That's great.
It's the single greatest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. If we don't communicate properly what we want for ourselves, for our family, I've coached a lot of men, and my number one thing to get them to realize is you're telling me that you're doing this for your kids. But last time I checked, a 2-year-old's not asking how the bank account looks. So as long as you admit it, that it's for yourself, communicate with yourself properly, and we can we can go somewhere. And, that's the game.
I love that. There's, I can't remember who said it, but I learned this a long time ago when we talk about communication, is communicate in a way that you can not only be understood, but that you're also not misunderstood. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings with service technicians or installers or training classes or whatever it is, and the person that's either teaching or instructing is communicating in a way that in their mind they're like, this is as clear as it gets. But you have an entire audience that's sitting there that has misunderstood everything that you have just talked about. And there's so many reasons why that happens, but when you can, I think it was Steve Jobs that talked about, it's like when you can get your thinking so clean, and that like, the communication and the message that you give is so simple and clean that it cannot be misunderstood, that like that's how you really communicate and excel in that space.
And in relation to kind of what I've been through in my life, I've helped a lot of people get sober as I've got sober, and people that haven't had a problem with addiction or drugs, they look at alcohol as the problem. And what they don't understand is alcohol is just the vehicle. Just there's a problem, right? And so what I tell everybody that hasn't been sober or trying to get sober, shut the fuck up, stop talking. You don't know what you're talking about. So let me, and so guess what? I can get in their space like nobody else because I lived it. And so I think what happens a lot of times is people have disconnected from the moment of change within them. All right. My only issue with the big time speakers is they don't speak with the people anymore. They speak on top of the people. And that is my bigger issue in business. It's my bigger issue in everywhere. It's this you've forgotten where you came from kind of conversation, for lack of a better word.
Well, no, I see the same thing. I've done the same thing. I've experienced that from both sides of the equation, from the one standing up and speaking and the one sitting and listening. One of the things that has really, I guess, kind of changed the way that I engage with management, in particular, is through counseling. Not from like, I'm not talking like a therapist, but like every Monday morning, I have a service management meeting. I have all of the different department managers on our service business come in, and it's a council. We have topics that we are going to discuss. There is no predetermined solution to any of those things. So it's not like I've made a decision and I'm going to disseminate it to you. It's going to be, here's an issue, and we're going to talk through this together. And together, we're going to make a determination as to how we're going to approach or tackle this problem and move forward. But like getting to that point where, it's hard. I've got an ego. I absolutely do have an ego. My wife reminds me of it regularly that I have an ego. I always tell her that there's like a fine line between confidence and ego,
Yeah.
And I say I toy that, or I toe that line all the time. But I keep your ego in check and realize that, hey, you hired people because they're intelligent. You hired people because they're good at what they do. You should probably shut up and listen to them sometimes and allow them to help identify and solve problems. But we do a lot of that through sitting down in kind of that council mindset of, again, no predetermined outcome. We know what the issues are. Let's counsel together and figure out exactly what we want to do as a team to work through them. And I found that like that's significantly helped me not be that guy that's standing up in front of people and talking at or over or around everybody that's sitting in that audience, but just like being willing to just shut up and listen. And put the ego aside for a little bit, that like, hey, some of these people are going to have much better ideas on how to deal with problems, and they're going to solve them better. They're going to solve them faster, and they're going to consider things that you never even considered in that process. And for somebody with an ego, that's hard to do. But once you figure it out, and you can start executing on it, it makes everything so much easier, and it builds such better teams of managers at the business at the same time.
This is not that this is going to happen to you and your wife, but my ex-wife used to say, this is for your wife, by the way, for tonight. She'll get a chuckle. My ex-wife used to say, so you have a personality that really fills up the room. Maybe sometimes you shouldn't walk into it. I think you and I have some very similar tendencies. I get pumped and I get excited, and that's great, right? But like, let me give you an as is, and then we got to get out of here. There's a guy I brought on that I wanted to get the promotion to because I got him back after he left. He came back. I got him, and I was so pumped because he'd been doing a great job. And my COO at the time, now CEO, was like, hey, I understand that you want to do that, but don't you think it would be more important that his manager gives him the promotion? And I was like mowing when he said that to me, and I was like, yeah, you should go fuck yourself, dude. And then I was like, I was like, but you're right, but it doesn't mean I'm not happy about it. And he goes, that's the only way we scale. And I was like, yes, you got it. You're 100% right. Yeah, I get it, but man, it's hard sometimes.
It is, and that's I should probably never let you talk with my wife, but
never. No,
you're gonna teach her all sorts of new things to say to me that are just gonna.
I'm gonna teach her NLP, and she's gonna get you. Yeah, it's over. Yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah, she'd love that. But she's been the biggest help. In
dude, let me tell you something.
Keeping that ego in check.
I could describe her as close as I could get to a woman. I could describe her very closely, but without even meeting her, knowing you, and a couple of times we've talked, I could describe her like to a T. Listen, this is a true story. My fiance listened to my podcast before we got together. The moment that we got together, she's never listened again. She's like, I hear you enough. So there's just like nothing, like it doesn't matter. Oh, you spoke on stage. That's so amazing for you. So what are we having for dinner? Like, just,
Well, so I'll share this one last thing with you. Give you a little window into the relationship. So a couple of years ago, I got asked to speak at Pantheon for the Service Titan event, and it was the first one after COVID, and it was at the Coliseum in LA, and we had to do this outdoor event with it. And so I invited my wife. She'd never seen me on stage before and anything. And so she flew in the morning of to come see me. And I'm tracking her on Find My Friends as she's coming. And I'm like, she's going to be late to like the biggest stage that I've ever spoken on in my entire life. And like in my mind, I'm like getting kind of pissed off a little bit. And it's like, and I'm like, no, I have no reason to be pissed off. She flew in just to hear me speak for 40 minutes, and then she's going to be gone tomorrow. Like, I need to shut up. And so I started speaking, and I realized, I'm like, she's still not here. And so I paused and I said, hey, my wife is running late, but she's absolutely amazing. She's been my biggest supporter forever. She's never seen me speak like this before. All of the good things that I have in life at this point, I probably owe to her. So what I want to have you guys do is when she walks in, I'm going to wave to her, and I want you all to just stand up and clap for her, because in reality, without her, I'm not here. I'm not me. Because in my mind, I'm like, I'm paying tribute to this amazing woman.
Yes.
And so I do that. And she walks in and I wave to her, and everybody turns around, stands up, and they start clapping and cheering for her. And that's the worst possible thing that I could have done to her, to have 500 people turn around and just stare and make her like that sole center of attention. And she had no idea what was going on. And so, I told her afterwards what had, happened and everything. And the rest of like the time that she was there, we'd be walking around and people would be like, oh, you're the wife. Yeah, you're the wife. And they would just keep cheering for her and clapping for her and everything. And I thought I was doing something to honor her. And in reality, I was like the most mortifying thing that I could have done to her. And so I've learned since then, like, she's able to come, but she has no desire to be in the spotlight whatsoever. No. She's just there to keep me in check, and she does a really good job with it for the most part.
100%. So if people want to track you down, they want to find you, how would they do that?
The easiest way to reach out is through email. That's the thing that occupies most of my time and attention. So email address is mballard, that's BALLARD, at sunrisehvac.com. Easier version, which I probably should have thrown out there, was just Matt, MATT, at sunrisehvac.com. It goes to the same place. So if there's ever anything that I can do to help anybody that wants to talk business, talk HVAC, talk plumbing, whatever it happens to be, I love the opportunity to give back to the community that I owe everything to.
I love it. Guys, if you got some value from this, send it to a friend, and we'll see you next time. Folks, if you made it to the end of the episode, I'm sure you found some value with what you're listening to. If you could send this to a friend, rate us and review us, share us around. The more that you share us, the more that we can share content with you. Thank you all so much for your time and listening, and we'll see you next time.